All right, Ike. Well, in the news this week, I don't know if you had an opportunity to take a look at the Defender 130 spoilers, as all things in the UK, as we know, are kept top secret. Nobody talks about anything ever, except that everybody talks about everything always.
Everyone is an aspiring Q.
Yeah, everybody has some secret thing going on with a
They
Land
love
Rover
secret passages and secret rooms and panels and secret handshakes and
it's everything is
yeah,
just
a
top
bunch of
secret.
Masonic motherfuckers over there.
Apparently, secret garden parties in the middle of COVID. That's
that's a big deal.
Ouch, tough.
They love secrets, but they hate when other people have secrets.
It's exactly right. Yep, that's exactly right. And you know what? Who can blame them? So in the Tower of Secrets, the Defender 130 was spoiled apparently by some patent drawings. Did you see the patent drawing? It's like I actually think they first of all should just announce vehicles this way as like child's coloring sheets. It's it's just the line art drawing, the patent drawing of the Defender 130. And I actually think absolutely going to print it out and have Cooper color it because it looks like a great coloring sheet. But also, proportionally speaking, like we said when some of those like renderings and stuff came out, it looks a lot better.
It does.
It really does.
Yeah, the overhang changes the way it looks, and proportionally, it looks more similar to the classic Defender, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it does. And actually, it's funny because it's kind of the one I as you know, Liza and I have been locked in constant unending conflict on the 90 versus 110. I may be switching to 130. I mean, I think I might be on Team 130 over Team 90 now. Again, if you take into account, I still think the 90 looks the best, and I still think like if I had a choice without any need to actually use the car to do anything, that the 90 would be super fun to have. But the 130 seems like the ultimate sort of practical vehicle. I don't think I would get the extra, the 700 seats in the back of it or whatever. But just the cargo space in the 130, one would assume it's like a foot and a half longer or something, right? So it's got to be significant in there because I don't, the inside of the new Defender, it feels like the walls of that car are 3.5 feet thick.
They are.
Because it's so big on the outside, and then you open it and it's sort of like peering inside of an English, chocolate croissant. There's just a very small tube of emptiness down the middle of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the modern cars have to have all that insulation and soundproofing and safety gear in the doors and, places.
900 miles of wires and
Yeah. They should just make the soundproofing out of computers, save some space.
Oh, that's a good point. Make the whole airplane out of black box material. Yeah, that's a good. It's a good point. I think. I don't know. I think I'm on Team 130. I'm interested to see one in person. But I think it looks pretty cool, and it should make it a little more functional.
I think the 130 and the 90 are the best in terms of aesthetic proportion, definitely.
Yeah, which is interesting because I think previously the 110 of the classic Defenders was probably the one they sold by far the most of. I think that was the most popular model. The 130 was pretty niche and really more of like a utility thing. And the 90 they certainly sold a ton of, but I don't think anywhere close to the 110. But now I think you'll probably see a lot of people who bought 110s will migrate to the 130 because the 110 doesn't have a ton of room in the back. It's pretty little back there.
I mean,
and the 90 of course is non-existent. You can put a shoebox.
Everything is kind of moved back on that car, right? The hood is quite a bit longer. Bonnet, if you're of that persuasion, is quite a bit longer. The rake of the windshield is less steep, and so it kind of has this appearance that everything has sort of migrated towards the back, and then once they got to the back, they were like, "Oops, we're out of room.
We're done. We're out of room. We're done."
And so the 130 kind of solves that problem where it overall looks more proportionate.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, theoretically, there's more room for batteries and things for the hybrid version. There's just generally more room on the roof for your roof accoutrement, your roof decorations. You put a chimney up there, weather vane, whatever.
The roof pack.
You can put. I wonder, can you double stack the spice racks on the back of the 130?
The club sandwich.
Side by side? Oh my goodness, it'll be great.
Yeah,
you can have one for dry ingredients, one for wet ingredients.
Probably.
Oh, I can't wait. You can have a double wide ladder on the side. Maybe
that's an American option as the
double wide ladder. Yeah. It's going to be perfect. I personally can't wait. I personally can't wait. So speaking of can't wait, came down to the workshop the other night. If you saw my Instagram post, there was a magical puddle of coolant on the ground underneath the stage one, and realized that, that tiny little hose connector that allows the overflow tank to spew out coolant into the overflow tank was just spewing out coolant around the little connector. So it had finally given up, and so tearing that thing apart was last night's job to get it off to the radiator shop. I would solder it back together myself. I'm certainly capable, maybe with heavy air quotes, of doing that. But it looks like it's it probably needs a trip to the radiator shop. I'm going to take it to the muffler shop. Coincidentally, we're going to take it to the radiator shop.
Don't do that.
Have them do the once over. There's a great classic radiator place here in Northridge, which is where all classic things are. And get them to give it a once over and just make sure it's good. Unfortunately, you never want that.
It's not going to be good. I'm sorry.
It's never going to be good. It wasn't good to start. So.
No, it's 50-year-old, thin British Leland brass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's and of course, as you know, the stage one has a basically unobtainable radiator, as it was one of the parts that is like a one-off for that car.
Yeah, but you can recore that thing. It'll be fine.
Oh yeah. I think we'll probably recore it, and the tanks look like they're in good shape. Just the little hose connectors and everything are starting to break, and they're getting brittle, and so they'll give her the once over, put her back together, and she'll be good as new. So
still lasted quite a bit longer than an aftermarket glued together radiator.
Oh yeah, no question. I mean, that's the thing. You think about how many times those things heat cycle over the course of literally 50 years. It's amazing, it's amazing. They still work, it keeps the V8 Rover engine cool, which is cool-ish, which is no easy task, because that thing is constantly trying to liquefy itself. It was good. It's actually relatively easy to get out, and like the Defender, thankfully, you can take it out without having to take the slam plate and everything apart. The grill shroud and everything doesn't have to come off. It just lifts out, sort of, once you get the fan and everything out. So not too bad. All in all, pretty good. So speaking of 50-year-old Land Rovers, or in this case, Land Rover enthusiasts, we finally have, probably one of the most anticipated guests, or at least anticipated, depending on your persuasion, guest that we have been trying. The white whale of our podcasting endeavor here, the world famous Michael Bishop, finally joining us here on the show.
It's been difficult because you keep shooting harpoons at him.
It is true. I've been trying to land Michael Bishop as if he was a beluga, but finally we have we've convinced him to come on the show, and we'll talk about it during the show. But for a no better reason, certainly could not have found a better time, a better excuse for Michael to come on. So let's rev up the interview machine. I'm not sure what fluid it's running on today. I think it smells a little bit like a bacon grease, maybe.
It's sort of like CV grease and bile. I'm pretty sure that's what it runs on.
Right. Makes total sense. Yeah. Makes total sense. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we'll rev her up and get Michael in here, and we'll go from there.
Here we go.
All right. Well, finally joining us, a storied individual in the Land Rover community, one of the most requested guests, specifically by Bob Ives, who has been asking for Michael to be on the show for the last couple months. So we are joined by the legendary, a member of the Holy Trinity of Land Rover enthusiasts, Michael Bishop. How are you, sir? And welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Steve and Ike. Pleasure to be here, indeed. Bob recommending me. So that's an echelon to be in. The height of camel trophy royalty as well. It's just
that's right.
I always pinch myself when these things happen.
He's
so
an
it really
listener. Bob is.
He is. I have to say, as we should probably shout Bob out every episode. He is. He's a big fan of the show. He has a lot of tractoring to do out there on the farm, and so somehow this, I'm sure, makes that task even more tedious than if it was without. So we appreciate it, though. We appreciate Bob immensely, and we'll have Bob back on the show again sometime soon. But Michael, you are, of course, I mean, as I said, not even selling you short, a storied individual in the Land Rover community, and have been for decades. You currently are at the Jaguar Land Rover Classic Works, specifically on the Land Rover Classics side. And Ike and I were lucky enough to come and visit you there at Land Rover Classics and see all the great cars you have on offer, and the shop, and the giant collection of double stacked Land Rovers, secret Land Rovers, of course, nobody's supposed to know you have, all this sort of business. It was really a joy to be there, and we appreciate you. Yeah, don't talk about the secrets. Yeah, it was a joy to be there, a joy to see that all, and so talk just maybe for 5 minutes for those folks who don't, a couple minutes, 45 seconds for those people who don't know about Land Rover Classics, just what you're working on now, and then we'll sort of travel backwards in time and talk about some other stuff going on. But what's on at the Land Rover Classics these days?
Yeah, so Land Rover Classic, effectively we have a number of programs around. There's obviously the Reborns, which was the Series 1s and Range Rover, and then we have the Works V8, which is trophies, just about to launch its way into the world. We've done the 70th edition previously. We did a bespoke edition called the Selfridges edition, which was a one-off. So that gives you a clue that there's a home for Works V8 Defender. And then the other thing we have is what we call the Works Legends, which are all the vehicles in the showroom for sale, be it a Reborn that's come back to us or something we've seen in the marketplace. We've gone, yeah, that's really nice, that's really cool. Yeah, we wouldn't mind putting our name behind that and finding some customers and good homes for these fantastic vehicles. Yeah,
very cool. And what an incredible showroom. I mean, anyone who has an opportunity to visit you guys there, it is, really, really cool stuff. And there's occasionally a partially destroyed James Bond Range Rover here and there, or something like that. So definitely some really, really neat stuff.
Yeah, always a surprise. Neat stuff on display, kind of mixing it up. Every time I see a picture of the showroom, there's a different orientation, different selection of vehicles worth stopping by more than once.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. I've been there a number of times and never disappoints. Always.
They're disappointed to see you though.
They are always disappointed. They try to sort of make it seem like they're closed, draw the blinds, turn the lights off. But I'll look around until see someone moving inside. So, Mike, let's travel back into the past. We won't say, to protect the innocent, exactly how long in the past, but why in the world were you first attracted to the Green Oval? What brought you to Land Rover as a brand in the very first place?
I suppose the best way to answer that is put it into the era. So this was the 1980s. I was a kid doing a paper round in Melbourne, Australia. My uncle had a 2,500 acre farm outside of Melbourne, which is in a fantastic, really green, really off-roady area. And I at the paper shop, I saw the four-wheel drive magazines, and I was like, well, wow, I've got to do something like this. Obviously, at that age, at sort of 12, 13, there was no way I was allowed to drive any of the farm vehicles or anything like that. So I was inspired by a school friend whose dad had a Series 2A ex-Army long wheelbase, which, funny enough, they still have. They do. And, wow. I sort of thought, well, if Adam can get something like that, and get access, I can do that. So I went and looked in the local, sort of papers called the Melbourne Trading Post, and there was, it was the 40th anniversary era, and suddenly there was a lot of news and suddenly a lot of these little 80-inch Land Rovers coming up, and they were, sort of $700, $800, $500, and I thought, yeah, I can afford that, as right. Sort of the mad sort of 12, 13-year-old me was. $25 a week. I sort of like, yeah, I can do that, So I saved up all my money. Dad was pretty open to the idea, which is I'm still inspired by that decision, because a lot of parents would have just said no, because he's not into vehicles or cars or
right
like that. And so I went and I'd come racing home on the tram from school, run. It was on a Thursday, the paper shop. Grab the trading post, race home, because there was no mobile phones or anything that time.
Yeah, right.
I'd get to the ring up the first ad that I'd see, and usually, the Land Rover sold. Oh, sorry, mate, the Land Rover sold. Sorry, mate, the Land Rover sold. And so that went on for weeks, and I got really disheartened. There was one day I just couldn't get hold of this bloke, and I rang, no answer. And the next morning I decided to ring at 7 o'clock in the morning, and, and he answered, and I was like, I really want the Land Rover. I've got to have the Land Rover, this and that. I didn't care. I mean, he could have given me anything. I didn't know really what I was doing. But he was a really good guy, and he'd been an enthusiast and belonged to the club and understood why people are passionate about these vehicles and what it meant. And so we jumped in the car, mum and dad, and we went out to just outside Melbourne and bought this 1949 Land Rover, which luckily was a good one. And so I got that home as a pile of bits, and joined the club, and some like-minded guys was like, we started building old cars when we were teenagers, and lo and behold, made it quickly a set of friends, and we put this little 80-inch back together, and I was running it up and down the driveway by the time I was 15, 16.
Oh, that's fantastic. And then later on, obviously, you became very much involved in the Land Rover Club, and specifically in the pre-production cars.
Yeah, well, that little step of going and buying the car, not really knowing quite what I was doing at that age, joining the club was absolutely crucial to now looking back at what I've done, because there was a few people who were obviously really good at advising the vehicle side and finding to get parts and putting it back together. But there's some other guys who are really good at advising about where to focus your passion. And in those days it was writing, putting stuff in the club magazine. And I started writing a little thing called the Series 1 page in the Land Rover Owners Club Review magazine, Victoria. And there was a guy there, Lloyd, who is he worked at a university. He was a computer scientist, and he was very influential in HTML and its development and the internet. Cool. And so he's the first guy to put a photograph of a Land Rover on the internet. And it was he who suggested. He said, "Oh, why don't you put some of this writing on the internet?"
So Lloyd Allison.
Lloyd Allison. Yeah, you probably know Lloyd Allison.
Oh yeah, I used to look at those pages way back in the day.
Yeah, Lloyd's fourwheeldriveonline.com. Yeah, that was. He's still got his own pages now.
Yeah,
with a lot of my writing still on there. But that was a catalyst to me, I suppose, communicating with other like-minded people. And when I started travelling over to the UK and buying and selling Land Rovers and doing a few things, most people were like, "Oh, yeah, we've read about you. You wrote that really good piece about the the changes on the 80 and all this kind of thing." So that was amazing, and it's hard to believe. People always talk about the internet and how influential it is now and what we do. Yeah, but I was doing that, luckily, just pure luck in the early to mid 1990s, which is decades ago now.
It is a long time ago. Yeah,
transformative.
It doesn't seem like it was a long time ago, but it was a long time.
I mean, it was only 7 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, 7 years ago. 1992 was just like 6-7 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. I was talking. There's such a small world, this Land Rover. So I was talking to the other day on through social media, the guy who had found my Land Rover back before he sold it to the guy, and who I bought it off. And we're just talking about that. And so when I bought that 80-inch, it was 38 years old, that vehicle. And if you sort of think of put it into context, Discovery 1 is now over 30 years old.
Yeah, right.
So in a few years' time, it would been me buying that 4980 is equivalent of a youngster now, possibly looking at a late 80s Range Rover or
Yeah.
It's
which
great,
plenty of
it?
people are doing, especially in the clubs and things. People buying those first series discoveries, Range Rover end of the Range Rover Classic. That's absolutely the kind of things that people can afford now. People are buying and then using in clubs and trials and things like that. So that's true. You don't really think it's sort of depressing, when you think about it.
Well, I don't know. I kind of like it because there was all those Range Rovers when I was a kid, because ultimately, the 12-year-old, 13-year-old me was thinking V8 90,
of course,
by Camel Trophy Australia and all those things. And obviously the 49 at the time was all I could afford. So looking at those, those guys now, the youngsters coming through, if you could go and buy a late V8 Range Rover, or, something like that, it's like, that's pretty cool. It's your first car, isn't it?
And that is a great car. Yeah, I mean, especially the late model V8 classic Range Rovers are just, and over here they're starting to become a bit pricey, because I think people are realizing, like, this is a great car. It's everything you want from a classic car without some of the things that you don't really want to deal with in a classic car. And it's comfortable and it's really neat looking. And it's true. It's sort of iconic. And now, of course, the sort of second place, if you will, 49 Series 1 is the thing of sort of high end collecting legend sort of now. That's certainly nothing a teenager would be after nowadays, or maybe be after, but certainly not be able to obtain.
No, it's an interesting world. It is how the Land Rover enthusiasm sort of channeled itself, and as I say, putting the vehicles and your context into the time frame of where you were or where the company was or anything like that is critical to the stories. Yeah.
And so from that writing and involvement in the Series 1 registry and the newsletter that is a part of that, you happened upon sort of an interesting gentleman, and we've of course buried the lead on not the only reason that you're here chatting with us today, but a significant reason for the date that this show will of course come out on January 31st, which is the 101st birthday, save you, of Arthur Goddard, which is who is the subject of your book, They Found Our Engineer. And so talk to me a little bit, first of all. A very happy birthday to Arthur. Amazing individual and incredible story. And for anybody who hasn't read Michael's book on the subject, absolutely worth a read. Fantastic and super, super interesting. Really great early Land Rover development stories. So how is it that you came upon this individual that had in many ways sort of disappeared from the history of Land Rover, a very, very important person, but had sort of dropped out of the annals of Land Rover history?
It's interesting what crossover you get, when you start getting into vehicles and enthusiasts and people who are fans from all walks of life, and people who work for the company and all that kind of little tentacles, I suppose, within the Land Rover world. And one of the things that I was very curious about in those early the 1990s was, if you were going to make a product like a Series 1 Land Rover, you're putting a lot of investment in, a lot of tooling, a lot of work. You have a big team, but that stopgap element of the story, you'd only make it for a year and sell it. That didn't quite sort of gel entirely with me. How does that work? You just wouldn't. Yeah. You just possibly, such a risk, you wouldn't make any money. And obviously, a business, it doesn't matter if it's Land Rover or anything else, is obviously to make money so it can pay its employees and create a workforce and all that kind of thing. And so I was really quite interested in that. And when you see those early cars, there is a lot of development work in them, and a lot of development work going on as you move from a 1948 model to a 49, and from 49 to a 50, and so on. So what people coined at the time and was the missing link as to how that side of it worked. Was so to me didn't make quite sense. And the message of it's a post-war stopgap. We're only going to do it for 2 years. I was sort of like, no, there's more to this. There is definitely. And alongside that, I was of course trying to find a very early Australian vehicle. And, such a big country, like North America, you sort of, you're looking over a massive, massive field. And, instead of trying to find the vehicles and write them down, I had this idea of, okay, why don't we write down, what vehicles were sent to Australia. And then if you're ringing somebody up in the time, once again, before, modern phones and, cameras, you can ring them up and say, what vehicle have you got? So you're like, oh, I've got this. Or, tell the chassis numbers here. I've got a list. I'll confirm it. I can tick it off, and we can say, it's one of those, came from here, came from there, and that would give you a sort of a more, opportunity to define any sales data or anything you could find about the history of the cars. Now, alongside that, of course, you're going through all these, all the sales ledgers and dispatch books and stuff like that are around, from Grenville Motors in New South Wales or the British Motor Museum. And one name kept on cropping up as you go through, and you go through, and there's always this Goddard name. And any of the Australian cars would be writing down anything that was interesting internally dispatched to some, Morris Wilks or Spencer Wilks or internal factory vehicle. You write down the name, and when you had the database, it was like there was always in those those first 2 or 3 years, Arthur's name popped up all the time. But of course, you'd read the stories and read the books, and there was never any mention. So there was just a name in the back of my mind. I thought, what did he do? He must have done something really, really quite incredible. Didn't think anything more of it until we'd moved over here to the UK, 2008. Fast forward, I married, I helped put together number 16 and bought number 16 pre-production. We've done all this really, really cool stuff. And just completely out of the blue, I was talking to a friend, Alex Massey, who you all know, who runs in CKD shop, and he was a young lad there. Just bought his first Australian 48 model, and he just said as a completely out of the blue comment, oh, there's this old guy, Arthur Goddard, down the road who's got a place opposite Dad's who used to work at Rover in the 1940s. And at that point in time, I can remember it exactly as it was. It was like it was yesterday. I was like, I wasn't quite listening to the conversation because something, someone doing
Alex
a delivery.
Tends to sort of run on. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
He goes. When he goes for it, doesn't he? And I think someone must have knocked on the front door and delivered something. It was something that distracted me, and I sort of like, wait a tick, say that again. What was that? And he said, it's our guy Arthur Goddard, and I was sort of like, that's in Brisbane, Australia. This is in 1940. Sort of like, what's going on here? And I said, how do you know? And he sent me this link, to what was vehicle components, page there in History of Arthur. And it was just like, there's Arthur Goddard, he was, assistant chief engineer at Rover. And I was just sort of like, oh my God, this is, and Alex was, he was still, he's in his early 20s there, very excitable as you are as a young man. And I was like, you've got to interview him. And he's like, what does he do? And I, instantly, I could just grab this list. He had all these interesting vehicles, including one of the pre-productions. And we came up with a plan, a very, very quick plan, to ask Arthur about testing of Land Rovers in Belgium for what became the Minerva Land Rovers.
Right.
Antwerp. Yeah, because it was a very, very specific subject. It wasn't like, so you could really sort of narrow down and pinpoint an area to see how his memory worked, how he was. So Alex went away and came back 24 hours. She was in Australia, I was in the UK, with this interview, and it was like Arthur had done this job testing these Land Rovers against Jeeps for the Belgian military in Antwerp 2 years ago. And he was like, oh yeah, we went to Mr. Van Roggen's place, we did this and that, and we set the vehicles up this way and that way, and they had prototype 2-litre engines in them, and all that information which is in the dispatch records was just, Arthur could remember it, he could recall it. And I was just like, no way.
It's amazing.
It was unbelievable. So suddenly we were just like, kids in a candy shop. This was unbelievable. So you could suddenly, all these fantastic myths and stories around, and the center steer and the pre-productions and the missing link and the stopgap and that. You had, that insight. The assistant chief engineer who was reporting to Morris Wilks, about that. And it's like, great. So we wrote down, pages and pages of questions and where to go, and we cross-correlate it with information we knew, but facts that what Arthur had done. And we've probably got into 2 or 3 videos, and these are video interviews of around about 40 minutes long. And once we got into the third, and the information was liquid gold, I knew by this point I knew Roger Craythorne at Land Rover pretty well, and I'd done a few things with him, and number 16, and I was like, Roger, does his name Arthur Goddard mean anything? And Roger's like, yeah, he was there until the sort of the late 50s, I think. He was, he was an engineer. I mean, before his time. Roger was, apprentice in the early 60s. And he was like, you need to ask Jeff Miller and some of these other people that are around there. And Jeff was easy to get hold of in those days. Ring up Jeff and get Jeff like, I remember him being about. Obviously, Jeff was in the 50s. He was a very young engineer. And he's like, Arthur was, one of the big guys. He was one of the, the big dogs, kind of thing. And this ended up with, talking to Arthur, and he's saying, I worked with Spen King on the jet cars before Spen
jet cars,
and all this, and so I ended up going to interview Spen King. And Spen was like, I remember Arthur, and Arthur's personality. He's a bit of a larger than life character. Mm-hmm. He's got a very, very strong personality, very confident, even today. Knows exactly what he's doing with engineering. And he's been there, done that. And after his career at Rover, he became assistant technical director for Girling Brakes. He invented modern Girling disc brakes over Dunlop disc brakes. He knew, all anyone who's an influential engineer in the 1960s and 70s. He knew them. He worked with them. Wow. And so, it was just, unbelievable. Sort of pinch yourself. I still pinch myself now at that opportunity that are happening, and, getting all those fantastic stories. And when you get a whole pile of stories, you want to, I tend to want to share them, with people. Yeah. So putting it into a book was an instant no-brainer for me.
Made total sense, because it started off as sort of articles, if you will, in the Land Rover registry, and then from there, obviously developed into deciding to do the book.
Yeah, it was. In all honesty, there was nothing quite like it. There was at the time. Doing all the sort of the focused things over how they developed the long wheelbase Land Rover, which started off as 104 inches, and they went to 107 because you just
those
you
prototypes.
Get 86 and you put the you get 86 inches.
Tickford cab prototypes of the long wheelbase. Oh. Love those.
Yeah, all that really cool stuff. Arthur could sort of explain it, and this is what we're doing, and this is conceptually this is what we were trying to achieve. And because you look at think of a most people of course go back to an early Land Rover and they think of an incredibly simple vehicle. You can fold the windscreen down and you don't have a heater and that. Whereas obviously at the time, Rover, they were looking around the world at other products and they were seeing quite sophisticated utility vehicles coming out of North America and out of Australia. And they're like, well, that's the competition. If you take it from Australia, a Holden utility, which is based off the sedan, it was quite a plush vehicle at the time. So they're thinking long wheelbase, we need to do something which is a little bit more interior lines along the lines of a Tickford station wagon than just, a 1948 Land Rover where you fold the screen down. And once you got that concept idea, you sort of go, okay, I start to, get how this works.
Yeah. Well, no, and I think the interesting thing about your book and about these stories is that they're from the point of view of an individual, Arthur, as opposed to, and I mean, James Taylor has done some amazing histories of Land Rover, and, this door panel is supposed to have these rivets in this place, is kind of a thing. But what I really love about, and I've read it several times now, what I really love about your book is that it is very much, the story of one individual's experience, and not necessarily the, this Land Rover begot that Land Rover begot this, and these bolts got moved from there, and this has this kind of thing, which is great. And as a piece of sort of academic literature and research literature, those books are fantastic, and I love, reading the James Taylor books. But this is very much, the sort of the story of building a thing, and that thing just happens to be a Land Rover, more than it is the sort of, chronological history of the evolution of the Land Land Rover product, which I think is really, really cool. And it's interesting and fun to read from a I mean, if you didn't have a Land Rover, you didn't care about early Land Rovers, it's still a good read, just as a study in the way an engineer thinks through things, or the way a company sort of iterates on something. I mean, it's really good in that way.
I think it's really important as well that people, understand that, a modern vehicle manufacturer is always looking forwards, because if you look in the news today, of what's happening in the automotive world, and where it's going, obviously that's the core business needs to be moving with that. So if you put that context of where the core business was in the 1940s, in the 1950s, in the 1960s, you'll see different pictures and different patterns. And I think if you hopefully what I've put down, you've got a snap picture of that, so you can look at say a Series 3, for example, and you can say, okay, so what is a Series 3 Land Rover really about? And Series 3 Land Rover, obviously they've got a fantastic product, but it needs a plastic grille because that's legislation. It needs, anti-burst door locks. It needs all these things to fit in the context of as the product in that time.
That's right.
And talking to Arthur and all these guys, Roger, you understand that, an automotive company, manufacturer is a business, and they've got to work with the markets and with legislation and all these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've said this before, that, the Defender of today kind of answers the question of what that vehicle should be, much like the Defender of the 1980s and 90s answered the question that was being asked then. And the, Series 1, Series 2, Series 3 is the same sort of thing. It's also a little bit of like what people wanted from a car. For for everyone who says, the new Defender, we don't like that at all. It's just a betrayal of the whatever. There was a person in 1960 saying that about a Series 2. Hey, that was me saying, oh, we don't need all this. And it was like, and it still is. But no, I agree, and I think it was interesting to read about those iterations on what was the product in Series 1 and then Series 2 and then Series 3, and sort of look at it from that. If we were in 1950, the Series 2A or the Series 2 rather, is a major evolution of the original 80-inch, the 107. It's a total departure in many ways. Now we look back at it and we say like, oh, well, no, not really. I mean, all the way from Defender to Series 1, they kind of look the same and they sort of do. But, having that iteration at the time, I'm sure there was a bunch of Ikes saying like, body line, what is that all about?
Oh, the styling department is all downhill from there.
Yeah, it's all downhill.
But then again, what's the 1960s about? It's all about styling, isn't it? It's all about trendy shirts and, short dresses and all this cool design-based stuff. So the vehicle suddenly has to fit in that world. So it needs to be styled. It needs to have a little skirt so you don't see the chassis. It needs, that line down the side so your eye carries right down the side of the body side. And suddenly when you put it into that context, and you totally get the change in the evolution. And suddenly, nobody wants that single wiper. You want, wipers that, move in unison like your modern
Sometimes.
sedan.
Yeah. Like every once in a while. Yeah.
And that's a product. It's really funny you're just mentioning, about the way people perceive, sort of, a major, change in technology or something like that. One of the vehicles I was very lucky to have and own, and a friend of mine's got it. I can always, hopefully one day get it back. Was Australia's first Range Rover. And not many people know this story, but I chased it down. We were chasing around and chasing it, and I managed to find it just down the road from my family home purely by luck. And eventually I found some videos, some old films of it within the club, of it going around Australia and being shown to enthusiasts. And at the time, this was sort of 1971 Australia, everyone was like, these coil springs, they're no good. They're not going to work. This is nonsense. And that's what their view was at the time.
Yeah.
And that technology obviously proved them wrong, and that's the way it happens. People come up with, I remember TD5s coming out and people were like, oh my God, it's got a computer in it. Oh, we won't be able to fix this. And people fix TD5s,
That's right.
for breakfast.
Yeah. Well, the TDCI Defenders, I think, are sort of now largely regarded as the best one that they ever did. You know, the last one was sort of the best one, which I remember when the TDCI came out. They said, "What a Ford Transit motor! Nobody's ever gonna. That's terrible." It's sort of like now, of course, we look back and we sort of say like, well, that's the Defender that everybody wants now. You know, that's the one that's, they're sort of the most popular. Because again, I think it's a little more usable. It's the manners are a little nicer. They're, all that sort of stuff. And I think that you're exactly right. That, leaf springs, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like coil springs. Coil springs, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like airbags. Airbags, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like independent suspend. It just sort of goes forward. But then we sort of get to a place where, well, that's just what we have, and it works, and it's refined, and it works better than the before. And people don't want to talk about the fact that a brand new Defender 90, save the bit of body damage you could maybe incur, is going to be far easier to do way more difficult things off road than my classic Defender or the series cars. Not to say that they all don't have their own individual experience, but when it comes simply from like a technology equals capability standpoint, like of course the new thing's always better, and that's not necessarily what it's about. No, it's not. But no, it's not. But it's interesting, and well, maybe we'll sort of shift gear a little to say that it is interesting that Land Rover has made the decision to not necessarily completely forget about the history of Land Rover, and a lot of car companies now, I would say largely, European, UK-based car companies have really decided that no, actually, the nostalgic, the previous cars, the history of the company is actually really important to reinforcing that brand going forward. I think everybody now is starting to do not necessarily something to the scale of the Land Rover Reborn or Jaguar continuation or those sort of things, but every luxury brand certainly has something going at that kind of level now. And now we're even starting to see that, Mini is offering an electric conversion kit for the classic Mini. So BMW is getting into that business to a certain extent. And Ford is starting to, make electric crate motors for old Broncos and things like that. So what are your thoughts on the world of looking back at the history, and that now, unlike the maybe 1990s and 2000s, where car companies sort of said, ugh, what came before doesn't matter, we don't want to look at that. What are your thoughts? Obviously it's what you do every day, but just generally speaking, what do you think of that?
I mean, I think the opportunity to come and apply all these fantastic stories of the previous products and previous eras to the two great nameplates, Land Rover and Range Rover, and also the other things. I mean, when I was working at Solihull, it was just that was unbelievable. Solihull, mm-hmm. A World War II factory that has a test track on it and has these two incredible iconic brands coming from sort of Land Rover and Range Rover, and you're sort of okay, what other manufacturers have got that? And you can think of a few others that have a test track. You go over and what a great story. There's just so much to it, so much you can do with it, and I suppose social media gave us the opportunity to or people with brands to talk about their past a little bit more. Whereas traditionally with print media, with the newspapers when we were a kid, of course they're always talking about here's the new whatever it is. There wasn't really the space or the financial way of going, and other than someone writing a history book or something like this and that. But being able to use that content. It's a real buzz. It's when you get it right, it's breathing pure oxygen. Some of the things. It's very cool. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you see the factory, because like the factory is as much a sort of Land Rover classic experience as going to the classic showroom and looking at the cars. That factory, which it's very cool that Land Rover still lets people drive around those tracks, and you can go and sign up for one of the driving things and sort of do that. It's so cool that they still let people do that. that, and that they encourage it. I mean, it's Disneyland for Land Rover enthusiasts, and that's very cool. Yeah, I don't think, to your point, I don't think a lot of marques, you can't. I don't think there's a Ford test track you can go to in Detroit and drive around an old F-150. Maybe there is, I don't know, but certainly nothing to the legendary scale of going to that original factory and seeing those spaces and driving those tracks.
Yeah, definitely. Or east now. You can go and drive Gearbox Hill, where they tested Range Rover. You can go and do all that, and it's a fairly unique brand. Land Rover. You can do all these fantastic things just as an everyday enthusiast. Yeah.
I've driven down Gearbox Hill. It is a little, you could imagine in a prototype vehicle that you're not 100% sure if everything is going to hold on. That it could be a little, and certainly plenty of stories of people driving down on the roof of the car instead of on the wheels.
I've done a lot of laps around Gearbox Hill, but that's another story for another day.
Yeah, hopefully never on the roof. Yeah, good.
No,
Yeah, good. Well, it's coming to that time where, well, first of all, obviously, again, we can't touch enough on Arthur's birthday, 101 years old, incredible achievement. He's still well. Yes, have you spoken to him lately?
No, but I've kept in touch with Chris, his son, quite closely on how he is, and obviously I'll be getting in touch to make sure that he's okay and everything's good. He's enjoyed the day and had a fantastic experience, and I'll take it. I always.
Yeah, well, certainly a happy birthday from us and all of the listeners of the show.
Can you, speaking of which, can you tell our listeners where they can get a copy of your book?
Yeah, the best place to get it is on good old Amazon. The publisher I use is a print-on-demand publisher, and if you can go onto their site, which is a little bit obscure, but if you just go and type into good old Google, They Found Our Engineer, and I think that's the first and easiest place to get it at the recommended retail price.
Yeah, definitely a read that you need to do. We're starting, Michael, a Underpowered Hour book club, and your book is definitely one of the
mandatory
first,
reading.
One of the first in that lot. Yeah, mandatory reading.
No, thank you very much.
Affiliation. So, yeah, and like I said, it's just great because it is a good story. It's not just the rivet counting and that sort of business, which again, those are great, and I love those books and have and probably an excessive amount of them, but I love a story sort of in the vein of the First Overland and those sort of things where it's really telling a story that just happens to feature Land Rover as a character, but it's not necessarily a study of the deep inner workings of the car itself.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I was very aware of at the time is I wanted to get the story out. I didn't want to sort of procrastinate and try and do something which was absolutely what in my mind's eye would be perfect. Because Arthur, even then when he's late 80s, late 90s, I wanted to make sure that he had his moment, of celebrating his career and not just with just with Land Rover, with Girling and all those other things that he did. But I'm still looking at various elements of it. There's I'm always one of the fascinating things about Land Rover is the way right through to the modern products, the functionality of the off-road sort of traces right. You can trace it right back to those very early cars and the pre-productions, that through dash control system that never really came to anything, but that inspired the simple series system with the red and yellow knobs. And talking to Arthur, and he developed that. It's sort of like, wow. And if you sort of if there's a flattery in an engineering system, I think that series system is probably one of the systems which has been borrowed around the world. And,
they used that for like 35 years or something crazy like that.
Yeah, and there's some there's systems which aren't too dissimilar to it. We're still in other off-road style vehicles.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a popular forgotten element that Arthur also came up with, the tiny cactus mode. You can put the car into tiny cactus or into a giant snowflake.
Well, that's where the red and yellow knobs come from, because it's really simple. It's psychology. It is. So yellow when you're in is cautionary, isn't it? So you think about a way a normal series vehicle, not the really early ones with the You come along yellow, so you look at the road and you press yellow because it's cautionary, and it just goes into that. Whereas if something really hairy comes up, you want to stop. So red, stop. Put it into low range, think about what you're doing. And so that visual association to terrain response, grass, gravel, snow, mud, rut, sand, rock crawl, you look at the road, you go, oh, yeah, I need that. So it's exactly the same. Exactly the same from a functionality point of view.
Yeah, it's very cool. Yeah. It's neat to see that evolution and that sort of thinking behind there. And the rock crawl tiny cactus mode on my series Land Rovers is all not working. So unfortunately, I put the dial there, but it just is not connected to anything. So
I'm sure I can fix that for you.
It's a hockey puck that Ike has whiteout penned those little things on, and it just doesn't. It's actually not hooked up to anything, but it does make me feel better.
It took him 3 days before he worked up the courage just to ask me about it.
Yeah, like, did you, how does this work? I don't, it doesn't seem to be, actually it's not connected to anything at all. I think it may just be a hockey puck. Is this, anyways, but, Michael, this is the time in the show everyone, every, viewer, listener, looks forward to, and I think every guest dreads, is, Ike's, legendary, world famous lightning round, questions, very difficult, Jeopardy, style.
It's not at all Jeopardy style
questions. And they have to be formed into the answers are in the form of a question. Anyways, Ike, take it away.
All right, Michael, are you familiar with the lightning round? Quick.
No, just go through the rules and circumstances. What do you want from me?
There are absolutely no rules. Just quick questions with quick answers, and there's 5 or 10, and we'll see how you do.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, you're just going to ask me part numbers. What part number is 2172?
Really obscure stuff.
231601. Yeah, the wheel. Yeah.
No, it's not that bad. It's more opinions. All right.
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
All right.
Go for it.
Gas or diesel?
Depends on the vehicle.
All right. Leaves or coils?
Depends on the vehicle.
Oh man, brutal. Light green or bronze green?
Depends on the vehicle.
I'm sensing a theme here.
No.
Ring pull or levers?
Once again, I think it depends on the vehicle. I love both of them. I've got a ring pull vehicle, and I've got they're good both in their own individual way.
All right. HUE or JUE?
HUE.
All right. What is the best way to remove gear oil from your underwear?
The Swarfiga, that stuff they use in the UK. You just anything you get on your clothes, anything you just grind a little bit of Swarfiga into it. Shove it in the washing machine. Don't tell the wife.
Very practical answer. Practical answer from somebody that's happened to before.
From a very practical individual, indeed. All right. Well, Michael, hey, thank you so much for your time. This, I hope, is the first of many visits to the show, as we can't even in an hour-long interview possibly scratch the surface of the depth of knowledge and involvement in the world of land roving that you've had. But thank you for this, and what a better way to celebrate Arthur's 101st birthday than your first appearance of what I'm sure will be 101 visits to the Underpowered Hour.
Thanks, Michael. Great to have you on.
Thank you very much. Yeah. No, thank you. Pleasure.
All right.
Well, again, an incredible feat. Happy birthday to Arthur Goddard, the one certainly of the fathers of the Land Rover as we know it. And the Land Rover probably wouldn't be what it is today without his involvement. And very cool that Michael was there and able to spend the time and get the great book. If you haven't read They Found Our Engineer,
amazing.
It is amazing. It's super fun. It's a great read. So So more to come on that, and hopefully many years left to Arthur and the team. So in other news, next week, speaking of amazing guests, my good friend Ike and Steve, we have your good friend, my good friend, and one of our big UK visits, the legendary, if you will, Julian Schulheifer, next week.
Looking forward to that.
That's a huge guest. That's a big get. Of course, Julian was in charge of the sort of, maybe he helped to shepherd along the rebirth, whatever you want to call it, of JUE 477, the first production Land Rover.
The entire interview is just going to be semantics. What do you call this?
What do you call this thing? Is it what is it? How do you? And so, can't wait to talk to Julian about that. That's a super exciting interview coming up. And then we have a very special, like a Hallmark video, a very special Valentine's Day episode coming up after that, where your Jenna and my Eliza will be joining us to talk about a couple of tales. It's not Tales from the Trails. It's That's a Trip. That's a trip. By internet poll. It was voted.
That's a trip. That's going to be an embarrassing one.
Oh, it's going to be just.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I can't wait. We've got some great stories. So, as always, please head on over to the old YouTube and check that out. Like and subscribe. Turn on and slam that notification bell. And head over to the Patreon if you haven't. Check some stuff out there. Great stuff there. We've got new stuff coming up on the store all the time. All these things can be found at theunderpoweredhour.com. And you can order away interesting booklets that don't have enough pages, apparently. Great T-shirts, stickers galore, anything your heart desires. So, Ike, it looks like that's it for this week. Unfortunately, we have, again, run out of time for your review of Nando's, but we will make sure to work that in a future episode.
I'm crushed. That's really starting to get to me.
Yeah, it's too bad. We'll get them on there at some point. It's only a matter of time. So it's been a pleasure as always, Ike, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right, Steve. Looking forward to it.